Family, we are right on target. Please let me know if you can hear me. If you can hear me and see me, shoot me, an apple or some milk. If you can see me and hear me, the apple and milk emoji, guys. I love that we have this emoji, the apples and milk, because people are like, "What the heck is the apples and milk for?" Listen, one, if I ever get arrested, you guys are going to see me on the news, like a cult leader by the name of Mr. Biscuit with the apple and milk emoji. It's so hilarious to me. Guys, we almost have the Discord up. The Discord is probably going to be done by this week. I'm sorry I'm clearing my throat so much. I need some water. I'm wondering um, if this can be like a channel that is not only a reaction channel. It's hardly a reaction channel. It's more, the insights and the epiphanies, but a book club at like the exact same time. Um, because I want to do more books. I think this is kind of one of the coolest parts of my week. I don't know about you guys. There is even who is from uh somebody who is from who is a subscriber who lives like 2 hours away from Spokane, who's actually coming to Wisdom School on Sunday. I forgot. I was got too busy to message them back, but them and their son are like coming to Wisdom School, which is going to be completely legit. Anybody who is in Spokane or around Spokane, on a Sunday, definitely come to Wisdom School at the Hilliard Library. Check us out. We have a fantastic time. But we are on chapter 4 of Animal Farm. Animal Farm is only 10 chapters. We are 40% of the way there after this one. Um, Andrew Irwin, first time listener. We have a great time. Apples and milk to you. Listen, guys, I'm not going to hog the apples and milk. Thanks to all the members, everybody who's a member now. Thank you for gifting the memberships. You guys are amazing. So before we go into chapter 4, I want to do a quick recap of chapter 3, right? A 5-point recap of where we left off in chapter 3. So the first thing to notice, and with all the points of this recap, guys, I want you to recognize that there is a good side and a bad side to everything we're going to be going over. There's a good side, there's a positive and a negative, and I want to see if you guys can catch it. So the first part of the recap is that the animals establish educational hierarchies. There's a good side to that, and there's kind of a sketchy side to that, right? The pigs are at the top of the educational hierarchy. And the reason that's good is because you do want whoever's leading the movement to be intelligent. Knowledge is power, and you want someone powerful at the helm leading the group. And that's kind of the positive aspect of it. But the negative aspect of it, and I think something that George Orwell wants us to come away with, is that there's also slight inequality. There are hierarchies now of education. There are people who can actually read and write perfectly, such as the pigs. There are people who understand animalism. And then there are people who can only basically do their alphabet. There are people, there are animals like Boxer who only know A, B, C, D. And then once they get to E, F, G, they've forgotten the first 4 letters. There are animals who understand the 7 laws of animalism, and there's some that can only grasp the concept 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, right? So even though it's a good thing that they've established this educational hierarchy, it's also something that can be very sketchy and dangerous, and that establishes its own, sense of inequality, right? The second thing to remember about chapter 2, um, the harvest is more successful now that the humans are gone. They have the most successful harvest they've ever had. Now that's a good thing, And that's a bad thing. Why is it a good thing? It shows that they can be self sufficient. It shows that they can handle the farm duties on their own without the humans, which was a big pressure after Jones had left. Remember, some of them had been complaining, saying, how are we going to eat now? How do we survive without Jones? But the bad thing about that is, wait a second, wasn't this supposed to usher in some kind of utopia? Isn't Beast of England this dream that that old major had that says, we're going to be moving into like the land of milk and honey? If we're working even harder now than we were under Jones, and the pigs are giving us the same commands as Jones used to give, just adding comrade there at the end, what have we really gained at the end of the day? So you see how the brilliance of George Orwell is showing as this revolution is ushered in. There are both positive qualities and negative qualities. None of these characters are flat, and neither are the circumstances. So, number three, the third part of the recap here, and try to recognize the good and the bad in this, right? Napoleon educates the young. What's the good side of that, first of all? The good side of that is there is hardly an animal on Animal Farm more intelligent than Napoleon. I mean, don't you want your kids educated by the smartest, by the most intelligent? Don't you want them under the cognitive trajectory that Napoleon has to offer? That's the good side. But what's the bad side of that? Guys, Napoleon and the pigs have the highest incentive for the revolution in general, right? No one really knows what their motives are. We kind of knew the motives of Old Major. I mean, I think we came to the consensus that he at least had the love of the group in mind principally. But we're kind of going into this age, this time period, and now with number 4 of the recap, no one mentions the taking of the puppies. Remember, Napoleon takes away the puppies when they're born and like hides them away and decides to just educate them on his own. I can hardly see any good side in that, other than that Napoleon is very intelligent, and if he educates them, then they might have some semblance of that intelligence. But not speaking up at all, and just it's almost like this is a move into monarchy, and so you just kind of have to hope and pray that the pigs are good monarchs. And number 5, the fifth part of our recap is that the milk and apples go to the pigs. Not just the apples that have fallen from the trees, but the apples that the trees will produce in the future, right? None of the other animals get apples at all. And the pigs tried to put a positive spin on this in chapter 3. They said, well, don't think for a second that we're doing this selfishly. Don't you think I mean, most of us don't even like apples, and we don't even like milk. We're doing this for your benefit because, pigs just need this particular diet. And since we're the smartest and we're using most of the free energy in our minds to run the farm, this is something that we need. I think Napoleon or Snowball, they bring up science, right? Oh, science tells us this. This is just science. We need the apples and we need the milk. Yeah, the bad side of that is it's completely implausible. There's converging lines of evidence, but there isn't multi-aptness. Giving the pigs all of the apples and all the milk doesn't solve a multitude of problems. It solves one problem, namely that the pigs want it, right? Uh, but you were just seeing a lot more dominance taken by the pigs. And of course, there's murmuring and complaining when they say, "Hey, we want the pigs, and we want the apples, and we want the milk." There's complaining at that point, but at that point, it's kind of too late to complain, right? You've already let him take the puppies and put them in this secret place, and no one said anything. And so, little I don't know, little implications of corruption seeding in just kind of become obvious at that point. But we are now into chapter 4. If you are ready, shoot me the emojis. I'm going to wait for some emojis to come in. because I always have to check in, guys. My internet isn't the best, so I always got to check in to make sure that I'm audible. Perfect. Seeing it. I'm seeing pigs. I'm seeing apples. Apples and milk. Thumbs up. Excellent. So let's get started in chapter 4 of Animal Farm. Guys, thanks for being here. By the late summer, the news of what had happened on Animal Farm had spread across half the county. Every day, Snowball and Napoleon sent out flights of pigeons whose instructions were to mingle with the animals on neighboring farms, telling them the story of the rebellion and teaching them the tune of Beasts of England. Hmm. I wonder how reliable the pigeons' messages are. Right? Are the pigeons telling these other animals on the neighboring farms? Are the pigeons telling them, "Hey, just so you know, Napoleon and Snowball are the only animals that get any apples"? Are they saying that part, or are they just saying the good parts that we own the farm and we're not ruled by any drunk farmers, and the gates are never left open at the end of the day? What are they truly saying, right? In order to get these animals to kind of believe in this thing. Somebody in the chat said they speak pigeon English. There's a pigeon Bible, by the way. It's dope. Uh, Let me ask you guys, because of course the pigeons are going to represent the media. Do you trust the media? Do you trust the media at all, or what's your go-to source for news? No judgment here. If you don't want to say, you don't have to say. Nope, there's no, there's sometimes, there's hell no. I think the no's have it right now. Jolie said, "I only know I know nothing." Shout out to Socrates. My wisdom consists in the knowledge that I know nothing. Brenda says, "Not anymore." Trina says, "No." Leslie, "No." A lot of no's. um, and look, it's so polarized. It's one of the reasons that I enjoy debate so much, is because when two intellectuals debate, you will typically have some overlap where they say, "Okay, well, I have to agree on that," right? And then you can kind of find the truth where the truth is when two people who are debating, have their reputations to consider, let's say. But uh, the idea of the lying press, the idea that we shouldn't trust the press, it was popularized by a lot of politicians, but Hitler being among them. I think Hitler used to say the Lügenpresse, lying press, right? That the news media, they're telling lies. Similar to the fake news, right? Which is not to make that comparison. I'm not getting political on here with you guys. Um, but a lot of people distrust the news because of exactly what I'm suspecting of these pigeons, right? It's like, are they really telling the whole story about the hardships? Most of the time, it continues, Mr. Jones had spent sitting in the tap room of the Red Lion at Willingdon, complaining to anyone who would listen of the monstrous injustice he had suffered in being turned out of his property by a pack of good for nothing animals. Renegade, thank you so much for those gift memberships. I appreciate it. So Mr. Jones is now getting drunk, talking about how he's turned out of his property by these good for nothing animals. And what's interesting about that part, guys, is even in being outsmarted, even when you're outsmarted, even when the oppressor is outsmarted by the oppressed, he still doesn't recognize that the oppressed deserve not to be oppressed, right? Shouldn't that be the signal that you should clean up your act and that you should, treat these animals with more respect than you have been? The fact that they threw you out of your own farm, right? That to me would be a signal. It's like, wow, I really have taken for granted something, right? But in his mind, he doesn't change. Um, Even with you think of Revolutionaries like Nat Turner, W.E.B. Du Bois, Frederick Douglass, uh, even in their grasp of scripture, let's say, there were people who thought that because of the color of their skin, they weren't worth those things. So it's like oppressors just are stuck in that mindset. Um, so in Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire, he says it's not the job of the oppressed. It's not the job of the oppressor to free the oppressed. It's the job of the oppressed to free himself and then go back and free the oppressor, because the oppressor is locked in their mind into this oppressor mind state. And it seems that Jones can't get out of it either. The other farmers sympathized in principle, but they did not at first give him much help. At heart, each of them was secretly wondering whether he could not somehow turn Jones's misfortune into his own advantage. Remember that. It was lucky that the owners of the two farms, which adjoined Animal Farm, were on permanently bad terms. One of them, which was named Foxwood, was a large, neglected, old fashioned farm, much overgrown by woodland, with all its pastures worn out and its hedges in a disgraceful condition. Its owner, Mr. Pilkington, was an easy-going gentleman farmer who spent most of his time in fishing and hunting according to the season. So, guys, this farm that's adjacent to what used to be the Manor Farm is Western capitalism, at least according to my research. Orwell means for Mr. Pilkington's farm to represent Western capitalism, right? Um, so he spends all his time fishing and hunting according to the season. The other farm, which was called Pinchfield, was smaller and better kept. Its owner was a Mr. Frederick, a tough, shrewd man, perpetually involved in lawsuits and with a name for driving hard bargains, right? So, Mr. Pilkington's farm represents Western capitalism, and um, Mr. Frederick's farm represents Nazi Germany, right? Remember, it's you have to kind of keep up with this because the entire book is a double entendre. On the one hand, he's giving you the shallow rendering, and on a deeper level, he's talking about the revolution in Russia during World War II. And nevertheless, they were both thoroughly frightened by the rebellion on Animal Farm and very anxious to prevent their own animals from learning too much about it. At first, they pretended to laugh, to scorn the idea of animals managing a farm for themselves. Listen very closely to this part. The whole thing would be over in a fortnight, they said. They put it about that the animals on the manor farm, they insisted on calling it the manor farm, they would not tolerate the name Animal Farm, were perpetually fighting among themselves and were also rapidly starving to death. So, guys, they've gone from calling Animal Farm a joke to then saying that it's disorganized. And then look at what they finally say. When time passed and the animals had evidently not starved to death, Frederick and Pilkington changed their tune and began to talk of the terrible wickedness that now flourished on the farm. It was given out that the animals there practiced cannibalism, tortured one another with red hot horseshoes, and had their females in common. So, something interesting I want you to notice there, they're thoroughly frightened, right? Everyone is terrified of what happened to Jones, that he got ousted of, he got kicked out of his farm by this animal revolution, right? And because of their unwillingness to accept that reality, they make up a series of things. At first, they say that this is a joke, this is nothing to worry about. But as it continues to advance, they switch their tune and saying, "Okay, well, it's not a joke, but it's very disorganized. I mean, the animals there are starving. They're animals; they can't work farm equipment. I mean, obviously, right? But then, guys, am I frozen? I see somebody saying frozen. Am I good? Give me a thumbs up. Give me some milk and apples. Okay, I'm seeing a bunch of no's. Okay, good. I'm squared away. um, Okay, so these are the steps, and the reason that this stuck out is really important to me is because whenever you are doing something important in your life, whenever you are making a massive change, or even whenever you align with your own integrity, um, and yeah, we might read, The Way of Integrity by Martha Beck. I recommend that book to everybody. Write that down. The Way of Integrity by Martha Beck changed my life. But when you finally become a person of integrity, a lot of people that see the massive changes that happen in your life will at first not take it seriously. They'll say it's a joke. Oh, this is temporary. They're just, playing some kind of game. But then afterwards, it'll develop and say, oh, it's disorganized. You're not taking advantage of the same opportunities that you used to care about. You're not taking this or that as seriously as you should. And then finally, they might call it evil. They might call it immoral. I mean, look, this was done. This was the same pattern in the life of Socrates. This was the same pattern in the life of Jesus. When Jesus went to his hometown, they considered him a joke. And then the Pharisees said, this is disorganized. It's not according to the scriptures. It's not according to the Old Testament. And then finally, they called him evil and they killed him. Right. And so it's kind of the same thing. I kind of want you to recognize what these farmers are accusing the animals of. Uh, and so, look, it says, however, these stories were never fully believed, right? The community at large don't believe in these farmers. However, these stories were never fully believed. Rumors of a wonderful farm where the human beings had been turned out and the animals managed their own affairs continued to circulate in vague and distorted forms. And throughout that year, a wave of rebelliousness ran through the countryside. Bulls, which had always been tractable, suddenly turned savage. Sheep broke down hedges and devoured the clover. Cows kicked the pail over. Hunters refused their fences and shot their riders onto the other side. Above all, the tune and even the words of Beast of England were known everywhere. Guys, isn't one of the reasons that we're all here because music has the capacity to transcend, right? It's so funny that all of us are, from different backgrounds. The people in the chat right now, and there's 74 of us, which is incredible for, this being, the fourth live that I've ever done. To have 79 of us here, it just really shows that people from all kinds of different backgrounds, there's this transcendent thing about music because that's how most of us connected. Um, Something interesting. Tupac lyrics. Tupac lyrics are memorized by people who don't speak English. They hardly know what Tupac is saying at all. But because that revolutionary spirit that he has, I mean, there's people that wearing Tupac t-shirts in the Philippines. Another thing I wanted to bring up, Bach. Listening to Bach has a really, really transcendent capacity because how much layers are in Bach music, they're figuring out that it's almost impossible for a human being to hear the same the same piece of Bach's music twice because there's so many layers of complexity. Your brain can only pay attention to so much. And then when you listen again, your brain just pays attention to a different series of things that Bach is doing. So if you ever want to challenge your perspectival knowing, listen to Bach in the mornings, 10, 15 minutes. um, but above all, the tune and even the words of Beast of England were known everywhere. It had spread with astonishing speed. Brenda in the chat says, I love Bach. My teenager listens to it. My 4-year-old in the morning when she's eating breakfast, like sometimes we'll just turn Bach on. She knows what Bach looks like, at least in the paintings. um, it had spread with astonishing speed. The human beings could not contain their rage when they heard this song, though they pretended to think it merely ridiculous. They could not understand, they said, how even animals could bring themselves to sing such contemptible rubbish. Any animal caught singing it was given a flogging on the spot, and yet the song was irrepressible. Now, guys, this is probably the scariest thing about this revolution. The fact that even beating the animals, which is usually going to cause an animal to change course, uh, even beating them, even killing some of them, only makes the revolution more expansive. It only spreads the revolution because things like Beasts of England, right? It's not any particular being. It's talking about a way of being. How do you kill a way of being? How do you kill a spirit? That's what spirit means. It means a way of being, a process. And that's what this revolution has become. It's come to an it's more than anything that you can kill or beat with a stick. And that is a really scary dynamic when something can't be flushed out with like flogging. And yet the song was irrepressible. The blackbirds whistled it in the hedges. The pigeons cooed it in the elms. It got into the din of the smithies and the tune of the church bells. And when the human beings listened to it, they secretly trembled, hearing in it a prophecy of their future doom. Early in October, when the corn was cut and stacked, and some of it was already threshed, a flight of pigeons came whirling through the air and alighted in the yard of Animal Farm in the wildest excitement. Jones and all his men, with half a dozen others from Foxwood and Pinchfield, had entered the five-barred gate and were coming up the cart track that led to the farm. They were all carrying sticks, except Jones, who was marching ahead with a gun in his hands. Renegades United, you are goaded. Thank you so much for those memberships. That's amazing. You're the best. Um, guys, why do you think Jones is the only one carrying a gun and the rest of the farmers are carrying sticks? This is very, very important. Jones and the rest of the adjacent farmers have now come to take over Animal Farm and to make it the manor farm to him, right? Why do they all have sticks and he has a gun? Why do you think that is? Because I have my own theory. I think the reason that Jones has a gun and the rest of them don't is for a couple of reasons. Number one, because Jones doesn't trust these guys. Remember what it said about them when he was in the bar? It said they didn't really care that he had lost his farm. As a matter of fact, they were thinking about how they could use his misfortune to their advantage. If they all had guns, why wouldn't they try to take his farm from him? When they finally got, you see how disorganized they are because of like the evil in their minds, because of their self-centeredness. They're completely disorganized. Um, but I think another reason these other farmers besides Jones don't have guns is because he's been lying to them because of his pride. He's been calling this whole thing silly. He's oh yeah, it's a terrible, these terrible, it's never going to work. They're probably over there starving and they're lost. And so why should they take it with that degree of seriousness? It's a really interesting thing, the fact that he's the only one with a gun. And I see it, people saying in the chat accurately that he kind of knows what he's going up against. He tried to come in there with whips. Remember in chapter 2, he tried, him and his boys came in there with whips and sticks and they got whooped and they that's they lost in the first place, right? And so telling them to bring guns would have been a really egocentrically rational move. But There's just this, there's the folly of mistrust and pride and arrogance. So Jones here is the only one with a gun. Obviously, they were going to attempt to recapture the farm. This had long been expected, and all preparations had been made. Check this out. Snowball, who had studied an old book of Julius Caesar's campaigns, which he had found in the farmhouse, was in charge of defensive operations. So check out the difference between Mr. Jones's reading of Julius Caesar, because Mr. Jones bought the book. It's in the farmhouse. It's Mr. Jones's book. So Mr. Jones has corresponded with this same literature, and Snowball has now read that same book, the Julius Caesar book. But they read it quite differently, right? Jones never thought he would be in a military campaign. He never thought he'd be fighting back his own farm. He was just reading it for the sake of, the pleasure of knowing some history. When Snowball reads it, it's as a strategist, right? Which he found on the farmhouse. He was in charge of the defensive operations. He gave his orders quickly. This is Snowball. And in a couple of minutes, every animal was at his post. As the human beings approached the farm buildings, Snowball launched his first attack. All the pigeons, to the number of 35, flew to and fro over the men's heads and muted upon them from midair. So muted upon them is that these pigeons pooped on them. Everybody does their share. And even though that sounds trivial, it's very important, right? For the animals, each and every animal that has any strength within them has to do something to crush these humans. Whereas the humans are so disorganized that only one of them has a gun, and the rest of them have weapons that they were already beat out of the farm with before. Right? You see the subtle difference? I was like, look, even the little guys who really can't do much are going to do something on this end. And on this end, there's a mixture of arrogance and ego and all the rest of it, right? And while the men were dealing with this, the geese, who had been hiding behind the hedge, rushed out and pecked viciously at the calves of their legs. However, this was only a light skirmishing maneuver, intended to create a little disorder, and the men easily drove the geese off with their sticks. Snowball now launched his second line of attack. Muriel, Benjamin, and all the sheep, with Snowball at the head of them, rushed forward and prodded and butted the men from every side, while Benjamin turned round and lashed at them with his small hoofs. But once again, the men with their sticks and their hobnailed boots were too strong for them. And suddenly, at a squeal from Snowball, which was the signal for retreat, all the animals turned and fled through the gateway into the yard. The men gave a shout of triumph. They saw, as they imagined, their enemies in flight, and they rushed after them in disorder. This was just what Snowball had intended. As soon as they were well inside the yard, the 3 horses, the 3 cows, and the rest of the pigs, who had been lying in ambush of the cowshed, suddenly emerged in the rear, cutting them off. Snowball now gave the signal for the charge. He himself dashed straight for Jones. I see Mel saying, wow, Benjamin got involved. What do you guys think that means that Benjamin is taking part in this? Is Benjamin just down for the ride? Like for whoever, has power? Benjamin is an old donkey, right? He's the oldest on the farm. Remember they asked Benjamin um, if he's happy with the if he's happy with the fact that they had won the revolution. And Benjamin gave that cryptic answer. He said, donkeys live a long time. None of you animals has ever seen a dead donkey. And they just had to be cool with that cryptic response. You remember that? But Benjamin got involved. Benjamin's in there doing some work. Yeah, a couple of people are saying, where's the cat? Yeah, the cat in chapter 1 wasn't even listening to old Major. Um, let's take a look, see if we can find the cat. Snowball now gave signal for the charge. He himself dashed straight for Jones. Now look, we have to give some credit to Snowball, right? Credit where credit is due, right? Snowball puts himself in harm's way and actually leads a charge, right? So we can't say that Snowball is not drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit, right? Snowball genuinely does dislike the humans. He genuinely wants to put himself in harm's way for the sake of the revolution. He doesn't know whether he's going to be shot. You know, he's you got to give some credit where credit is due here for to Snowball. He himself dashed straight for Jones. Jones saw him coming, raised his gun, and fired. The pellets scored bloody streaks along Snowball's back, and a sheep dropped dead. Remember that. Remember that a sheep died. We're going to get back to that. Without halting for an instant, Snowball flung his 15 stone against Jones' leg. Jones was hurled into a pile of dung, and his gun flew out of his hands. But the most terrifying spectacle of all was Boxer, rearing up on his hind legs and striking out with his great iron shod hooves like a stallion. His very first blow took a stable lad from Foxwood on the skull and stretched him lifeless in the mud. You guys remember Boxer was the uh, giant horse, strongest by far on the farm. The guy who's taken as his personal slogan, "I will work harder." Uh, he just killed the guy. At the sight, several men dropped their sticks and tried to run. Panic overtook them, and the next moment, all the animals together were chasing them round and round the yard. They were gored, kicked, bitten, trampled on. There was not an animal on the farm that did not take vengeance on them after his own fashion. Guys, and even this, after the revolution happened in Russia, America and Germany and Japan landed on Russian soil, and the revolution did beat them all out of the country. This is there is a parallel here to something which actually happened. The revolution actually beat all those countries out. Incredible, incredible. And there's so many of these. I mean, it would be great to just do a live just on all of the situations where you're like, how did that happen? The Zulus in Africa beat the British. And I could imagine why, right? The Zulus run around like bumblebees, and there the British are on one knee trying to, load their muskets, in perfect lines, with they look like big targets with their colorful uniforms. One of my favorite rebellions was the rebellion of Toussaint Louverture in Haiti. Haiti was a big slave plantation which was owned by Napoleon Bonaparte. And in the middle of the night, Toussaint Louverture and his men said, "We are going to rebel against our slave masters." They woke up, killed a whole bunch of the slave masters. Napoleon sent his men out there. They died. And then he sent a whole nother troop out there. They died. Napoleon lost so much in those battles that he ended up selling Louisiana to America for pennies on the dollar. That's of course an oversimplification, but I love when the little guy wins, or when there's this unexpected victory, because at the end of that there's just this beautiful feeling of, what the heck are we supposed to do now? It's like, are you serious? We won? It's like the dust settles and you just wake up. You're like, wait a second. Is this heaven? did I die? It's like, did we win? Incredible. So somebody was asking about the cat. Check this out. There was not an animal on the farm that did not take vengeance on them after his own fashion. Even the cat suddenly leapt off a roof onto a cowman's shoulders and sank her claws in his neck, at which he yelled horribly. At a moment when the opening was clear, the men were glad enough to rush out of the yard and make a bolt for the main road. Guys, listen, I've been attacked by more cats than dogs. Cats are vicious creatures. If you guys have ever like watched house cat attacks on YouTube, they're hilarious, but they can also be very, very brutal. You know what I'm saying? Like a cat jumping off of something, sinking their claws into my neck is kind of one of the most scary experiences I can imagine. Um, a pariah said, "I have four cats. I feel his pain." Yeah. Look, the cat did her job. Even the cat suddenly left off a roof into a cowman's shoulders and sank her claws into his neck, at which he yelled horribly. At a moment when the opening was clear, the men were glad enough to rush out of the yard and make a bolt for the main road. And so, within 5 minutes of their invasion, they were in ignominious retreat by the same way as they had come, with a flock of geese hissing after them and pecking at their calves all the way. All the men were gone except one. Back in the yard, Boxer was pawing with his hoof at the stable lad who lay face down in the mud, trying to turn him over. The boy did not stir. "He's dead," said Boxer sorrowfully. "I had no intention of doing that. I forgot that I was wearing iron shoes. Who will believe that I did not do this on purpose?" What if revolution requires forsaking who you are? Boxer has a moral sense. Like he's violated his own moral code. And remember, two legs bad, four legs good, right? They came in trying to harm. They even killed one of the animals, and yet Boxer still feels this sense of regret, right? He still has a moral intuition. Check this out. What Snowball says: "No sentimentality, comrade," cried Snowball, from whose wounds the blood was still dripping. "War is war. The only good human being is a dead one." Isn't it fascinating? It's what this is saying is not all animals are equal in empathy. Not all of the animals on the farm are equal in empathy. What does that mean about the leadership? Should the pigs be in leadership if they don't have the same sense of empathy that other animals do? I mean, even Boxer's trauma isn't being attended to. Right? Boxer's just been through a traumatic experience. It's like, suck it up, soldier. Think about this too. Um, Snowball says this to Boxer. No sentimentality, right? You're not supposed to care about this human being that you killed. But notice that Snowball says this while bleeding from a gunshot wound. Isn't it interesting how death and physical pain can be used to manipulate? I mean, a sheep has died now, right? One of the comrades has now given their lives to the revolution. Does that give more power to the pigs? What do we think? Check this out, though. And this is a very, very powerful point. And this part, I think, stresses the intensity of Boxer's emotional experience. Snowball continues. He says, "War is war. The only good human being is a dead one," right? Look at what Boxer says now. He says, "I have no wish to take a life, not even a human's life," repeated Boxer, and his eyes were full of tears. Guys, Boxer is the type of animal that will work 3 times as hard as any animal on the farm from sun up to sundown without complaining at all. Even though he considers the alphabet extremely difficult to grok, he still every single day paws out as much as the alphabet as he can memorize, right? He still tries so hard to be a member of this. He never ever speaks out for himself. He never complains. But in this one instant, he's saying, no, this goes against how I morally feel. This goes so against who I fundamentally am that I have to speak for myself. Even though Snowball said no sentimentality, I'm going to break forth and show you this feels wrong to me. Right? Does that give you some sense of how deeply Boxer feel? It's like Boxer's not the one to contradict Snowball or Napoleon. He's going to do whatever they say. But in this one instance, right? It's just very, very, this is a very powerful moment in the book. It's like you really have to break people. Like, if you want to break their sense of compassion and break their sense of integrity, right? Uh, you have to kind of turn the people into an alternate version of themselves. And is it all worth it for the revolution in the end? Right? You got to ask yourself, is this worth it? If revolution means becoming something fundamentally different than I am, is it worth it? So Boxer says, I have no wish to take life, not even human life, repeated Boxer. And his eyes were full of tears. Where is Molly? Exclaimed somebody. Molly, in fact, was missing. For a moment, there was great alarm. It was feared that the men might have harmed her in some way, or even carried her off with them. In the end, however, she was found hiding in her stall with her head buried among the hay in the manger. She had taken to flight as soon as the gun went off, and when the others came back from looking for her, it was to find that the stable lad, who in fact was only stunned, had already recovered and made off. So it turns out Boxer didn't kill him, he just knocked him out, which is a good thing for Boxer. Might kind of ease the trauma. The animals had now reassembled in the wildest excitement, each recounting his own exploits in the battle at the top of his voice. An impromptu celebration of the victory was held immediately. What about this, right? Uh, Telling each other these stories about how violent you just were. Say, oh, I did this and I did this thing, and Boxer knocked that guy out, and I is that healthy? Um, or does that serve to kind of to calcify your moral sense, or just make you a little bit less compassionate, a little bit more dark? And for how long, right? Until all the humans in America are overthrown. The animals had now reassembled in the wildest excitement, each recounting his own exploits in the battle at the top of his voice. An impromptu celebration of the victory was held immediately. The flag was run up, and Beast of England was sung a number of times. I'm going to write that down in my book. Flag is number one, Beast of England is number two. Um, because at a certain point, these symbols are so powerful. They simplify really, really complex things, right? Even four legs good, two legs bad. Even that is a symbol for a greater narrative. The greater narrative is animalism, which no one understands on the farm except the pigs, right? The flag is a symbol that simplifies something really deep. Beast of England is a simplified version of a complex narrative and aspiration, right? And at a certain point, do you even know what you're doing, or are you just sacrificing yourself to these symbols? Um, so, Beast of England was sung a number of times. Then the sheep who had been killed were given a solemn funeral, and hawthorn bush being planted on her grave. At the graveside, Snowball made a little speech, emphasizing the need for all animals to be ready to die for Animal Farm if need be. Interesting. So, because one of them died, they now proclaim that each and every one of you should be willing to give your lives for this. The animals decided unanimously to create a military decoration. Somebody said the pigs didn't contribute to the battle. Snowball definitely did. He took some bullets. Where was uh where was Napoleon during all of this? Maybe we'll maybe we'll find out where Napoleon was. So they gave a decoration. Check this out. This part's very important. The animals decided unanimously to create a military decoration, Animal Hero First Class, which was conferred there and then on Snowball and Boxer. Guys, they're borrowing the same power structure as the human beings. They're borrowing the same power structure as human beings. And imagine that. And this is a conversation that we could have. Listen really quick. This was conferred there and then on Snowball and Boxer. It consisted of a brass medal. They were really some old horse brasses which had been found in the harness room to be worn on Sundays and holidays. There was also Animal Hero Second Class, which was conferred posthumously on the dead sheep. Guys, is it interesting that violence is sometimes sanctified with like shiny objects? It's like whenever you imagine the brutality of what you did, you remember this shiny object. And I'm not trying to say that we should in any way trivialize the bravery of war heroes or the bravery of soldiers. But it's so interesting that it's like, with all of the things that they have going on psychologically and internally. My brother has been deployed 3, 4 times and has shot people, has killed people overseas, and he's decorated. Uh, and even saying that word, decorations, right? Let's decorate this person. It's almost like we know that what you had to do might have kind of messed you up internally a little bit, and but we just want to put decorations on you so that when everybody looks at you, they can see these shiny objects that we've pinned upon you. Guys, does that help? Is that warranted? Am I accidentally um, trivializing that? I mean, what do you think? Decorations, decorations for war, um, ribbons and badges for violence. Hmm. Bell Gann said most actual war heroes don't even feel proud. They are very sad. I agree. I mean, those of them uh, who have done the hard work of maintaining, their humanity in spite of that, uh, and by maintaining their humanity, I don't mean to say that they've become subhuman because of what they've had to do, but I mean, when you have to do what some of these soldiers have had to do, I mean, guys, it's how do you see the world through the same light? You may never again. You know, uh, there was much discussion as to what the battle should be called. In the end, it was named the Battle of the Cowshed, since that was where the ambush had been sprung. Mr. Jones's gun had been found lying in the mud, and it was known that there was a supply of cartridges in the farmhouse. It was decided to set the gun up at the foot of the flagstaff, like a piece of artillery, and to fire it twice a year, once in October the 12th, the anniversary of the Battle of Cowshed, and once on Midsummer Day, the anniversary of the rebellion. Wow. Are you guys and that's the end of chapter 4, guys. Thank you for being with us. I really appreciate that. Um 88 of us here now. I think we started with something like 70. We got up to 95. And this only being chapter 4, that's pretty phenomenal. Are you guys familiar with the difference between the scout mindset and the soldier mindset? And it's about open, curious attention. It's kind of about debate. It's about interacting with something that you haven't seen before. When you go into a discussion, whether it's, politics or religion, something that you feel strongly about, do you approach your holy opponent with open, curious attention? And that's going to be another thing that when we finally get merch, he's going to have a shirt or hat that says "open, curious attention." Right? Open, curious attention is the currency of love, and it's very important in the cooperative principle. But when you have a scout mindset, it means that you're looking for ways that you might be wrong so that you can educate yourself. If you're talking to someone who disagrees with you, are you talking to them in a way that has this humble approach that says, "Hey, you know what? I might be wrong about the thing that I care most about. And I'm going to be vulnerable enough to admit that. And I'm going to allow you to shape what I have to say as long as you give me that same favor of open, curious attention. We can have a genuine exchange. And the best conversations happen that way." That's the scout mindset. And the soldier mindset is when you go into a conversation with something to protect, right? It's what happens when you treat your opinion as uh, when you treat your opinion as something that you own, a possession, right? Your opinion is a possession, and you have to accessorize it, right? So it's like, I'm going to defend this possession. You're trying to take my possession. You're trying to take my opinion, but this is my opinion, right? I own this opinion. I've been accessorizing this opinion for 30 years. It's like so many people, they brag to me about how long they've thought something or how long they've been something. And to someone like me, that's not very impressive. I want to know about how you've changed, how you've developed. Someone put in the chat, uh, all I know is that I know nothing, right? Socrates said, "My wisdom consists in the knowledge that I know nothing." And my favorite interpretation of that quote is that Socrates was so he was so um, he was so familiar with epiphanies, right? Epiphanies are things that just blow your mind. When you have an epiphany, you see the former self before the epiphany as totally ignorant, right? And so Socrates was having so many epiphanies that he knew that tomorrow's self would consider today's self ignorant. Right? Isn't that a brilliant thing to say? Like, look, I know that tomorrow's version of me will know a lot more than today's version of me. So I'm just going to consider myself ignorant from the jump. From the beginning, I'm just going to admit my wisdom consists in the knowledge that I know nothing. Every opinion that I have right now is going to dissolve in the current of development. Even scientific ideas, they dissolve in the current of development, right? It's always changing, and so that's the difference between the scout mindset and the soldier mindset. The reason that I bring this up is because that's where chapter 4 has left us with this dichotomy, right? What old Major promised, when what old Major, that old pig that was buried in the orchard in chapter 1, what old Major promised the farm animals is, look guys, I'm going to give you this utopia. I've had this dream about milk and honey. I don't know exactly when it's happening, but we're all going to have this scout mindset. It's going to be this utopia. It's going to be paradise. Remember, paradise means walled garden. The walls being the boundaries, and the garden means your ability to explore. It's just going to be this perfect paradise. And instead of the scout mindset, all of them are being set up as soldiers. You have an idea to defend. You have a flag to defend, right? You have a song, the Beasts of England, which you have to commit to and memorize. You have animalism. You have the 7 principles, and you have the pigs who you should defer to and even give your children over to, right? Um, this book is brilliantly written. Valerie Donaghy, I appreciate the super chat. Thank you so very much for supporting the channel, and so many people who have supported the channel either with super chats or with memberships. It is extremely cool, the idea that potentially in a couple of months I could just support my family doing this, reading books, unpacking insights, just And the community, the Discord community, it's coming up. Probably by the end of the week, we will have the Discord community, which is going to be fascinating because then we can just hop on Discord, have conversations as long as we want. Um, and thank you guys so much for being here. Any other thing? Is there any other questions? Any other things in the chapter that I missed out on? I want to maybe close this down in 5 to 10 minutes, just so that we can keep all of these chapters pretty much to the same um, length for all the chapters. All the chapters are about an hour. So you can now, look at Animal Farm chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and chapter 4. We've got 6 more to go. Guys, thank you so much. I genuinely, genuinely appreciate it. And thanks you for being members. Everybody who gifted memberships is like really, really, really incredible. Uh, Unbearable says 12 months ago, would you have guessed you would be the leader of a book club? You know what's crazy? It's like um, book clubs, it's kind of easier when there's a dialogue. Like I prefer dialogues to monologues, which is one of the reasons I'm so interested in the Discord, so that we can just all be on this, stage having this big conversation about this stuff after this. So be like, hey, let's go from here straight to the Discord channel and continue the dialogue. John said 12 months ago, I wouldn't think to be part of one. It's going to be great to have like this big library of books that we've all kind of been able to go through. This is just the first one. After this, I think the consensus is to go into 1984, to do 1984 by Orwell right after Animal Farm. And we're 40% of the way through Animal Farm as of today. Even though, guys, I would like to get into some real dystopian stuff, like conspiracy against the human race would be wild. Yeah, 1984, great choice for sure. John says, I'm literally the only person in my surroundings who reads. Just books or audiobooks. A lot of people are in audiobooks. Guys, I read audiobooks for the first 2 years that I was in Spokane because it was COVID and I had just moved from Colorado to Spokane, got married, and I was like, okay. I was like, looking for a job during COVID is definitely not the move. And so I started reading audiobooks and that like supported me. They would just send me manuscripts and I would read them and put them on ACX, put them on Audible. John said I prefer actual books. Um, I prefer actual books too because I can write in them. Guys, if you have an actual book, and this one is falling apart because it's so old. This is a first edition Animal Farm. But you see, um, write in your books, like write in them. Every book that I have has scribbles. It's like whenever I was like, oh, because whenever I read it again, I want to know what I thought before. So you can keep up with how your mind develops when you tackle a certain narrative. I mean, this book, uh, I don't know if I can continue. This book is falling apart. It's so old. It's like when I turn a page, there's like either a crinkle or a page or, like a little crumb of the paper falls out. So yeah, it's just you got to be really, really careful. This book is this is the Benjamin of books. Guys, what did you guys think of Benjamin actually getting into the fight? I wanted to ask you guys about that in real time. Why did Benjamin fight the farmers? It's interesting, like the because everything Benjamin does, it's almost like he's on the right side. Like Benjamin knows, like, oh yeah, just one of you brought a gun, and the and the others have sticks, and I know what Napoleon and Snowball have been reading, and what the you guys are definitely going to lose. So I know which side to take. Benjamin is just an amazing foreshadowing of what the future is going to look like. He was hedging his bets. Yeah. He's been around long enough to know what works, for sure. So, chapter 5 is going to be this week. I don't know whether it's going to be Thursday or Friday, but I will know by the end of the day. Joanne says, I love discussing books at school. It's refreshing to have this interaction with you and to get to challenge my perceptions and consider alternative viewpoints. For sure. You guys remember Choose Your Own Adventure novels? Those were a thing when I was a kid. They never really blew up, um, but those were some of my favorites. You could like turn the pages, like if you choose this, then turn to page 73. But if you choose this option, then turn to page 62. And then the story continues based on whatever your choice is. My introduction, my real introduction to reading was Goosebumps, was R.L. Stein's Goosebumps books. Absolutely. And I started to the Goosebumps books really unlocked uh my perspectival knowing. I started to get into less trouble because when I was reading Goosebumps books, I was in after school detention. Jolie, you did not miss Dostoevsky. I said, and thanks for, I think you heard that in Animal Farm chapter 3. I said that we're going to be going over the Grand Inquisitor, Dostoevsky's Grand Inquisitor, which is in the middle of the Brothers Karamazov. And we're going to be going over that this week, hopefully, in addition to Animal Farm 5. We're really getting it done. And Richard Klein says, Man's Search for Meaning. That's interesting, Richard, because you're not the first one to recommend that. Like someone in my personal life from Wisdom School at the Hilliard Library. So I think we're actually going to start reading Man's Search for Meaning at the Hilliard Library as a part of that book club. But yeah, when I would read Goosebumps books in after school detention, um, yeah, I started to I got a bunch of R.L. Stein books because he was just really good at writing in such a way that I could wear his lenses. And that's what every author I think is trying to accomplish, especially in fiction, is for you to be able to see the world through their vantage point. I think Stephen King had a quote where he said, I never write about what scares people. I write about what scares me and then try to convince the reader why they should be scared of it too. That's a paraphrase, but it was a really really interesting quote. The difference between Stephen King and other horror writers. Dia Train, aka Liv, I'll just call you Liv, says my first book love was Stephen King. Stephen King's a tough read, and his books are thick. And he spends so much time describing the environment sometimes. So Stephen King was difficult for me to grok when I was young. I love Stephen King stuff now as an adult, but as a kid, I was like, dude, he writes Bibles. To Kill a Mockingbird would make a great future choice. That's for sure. Absolutely. My wife would join for that one. That's one of my wife's favorite books. Anne Rice books. Who's Anne Rice? I'm embarrassed. I don't even know who Anne Rice is. I'm looking up Anne Rice right now. Oh, Interview with the Vampire is Anne Rice? Wow. Queen of the Damned too? Whoa. Anne Rice is a beast. Interview with the Vampire. I remember the Tom Cruise movie was fire when Tom Cruise was Lestat. Yeah, buddy. For sure. Well, guys, we are at 2:10. right now. Thank you guys so much for your support for the book club. We were up to 90 people, which is phenomenal and amazing. Um, guys, just one more time in the chat, throw up the milk. I need the milk. I need the apples. I'm throwing up some milk and some apples right now. You find it. Throw the milk and throw the apples. Guys, thank you so much. Next time might be Animal Farm. Animal Farm is going to be this week again, but potentially this week we are going to do the Grand Inquisitor as well. So hopefully that pops up. Um, and guys, thank you so much for gifting memberships and supporting the channel in any way that you feel you can. Love you guys.